today to have a special guest on the podcast. Instead of just listening to me, I'm interviewing Becca Maxwell from Do Divorce Right. And for a lot of you listening out there, you've had disappointment in love. You hear all the horror stories about being able to find love the second time around, if you've got kids, if you're not mainstream enough, all of these barriers to find love. So we're going to have a good news story, which everyone loves. We're going to hear about a love story, Becca's story of finding love after divorce, and where she's also created a beautiful blended family where her kids adore the new partner. And what I love about this story is it shows how possible it is to have the love and the life that you want. So welcome, Becca.
Oh, Debbie, thank you so much. I'm a little bit nervous about this conversation because very rarely do I talk about that part of my story because I work in the divorce space, right? A lot of it is about my divorce story as opposed to the lovely love that I found afterwards. So I'm excited and a bit nervous.
I understand. I mean, I was on your podcast a few weeks ago and I felt the same. I'm very used to sharing certain parts of my story, but not the raw divorce story, which, is something that I don't tell as much anymore as I used to. So what I want to know is your story. Like, you got, sorry, getting tongue tied. I'm curious to know how you found love the second time around after your divorce.
Sure. Well, gosh, it wasn't just the second time, right? You were talking about finding love again as a second piece, but for many of us, it's just not our second adult relationship, right? So I've been married twice and obviously gone on to find love a couple of times since then. So my current partner, he and I have been together for 8 years, and as you said, my children adore him. I adore his children too. Like, it's just, we have got a very beautiful blended family situation. But when I was separating from my ex-husband, who's the father of my 2 children, we were living in Asia at the time. And we'd traveled. We'd also lived in Amsterdam together. We had, this international life together. But we were living in Asia, in Singapore, when the marriage was falling apart. And I remember thinking, if this ends, like, I'm going to be a single woman in my 40s with 2 children living in Asia, where on the sexual hierarchy of things, white women are way at the bottom. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to be sexless for the rest of my life. Like, this is just what I'm going to be signing up to.
Wow.
That it just wasn't even. Not only was it not that it wasn't just that I couldn't imagine falling in love again, it was that it's not going to be possible here. There are no white men looking for white women who come with the baggage of 2 young children and an ugly divorce, right? Well, I didn't know at the time it would be ugly, but I remember thinking, but even so, that has got to be better than this, right? The marriage was just awful, and I needed to walk away from it.
I was curious then to say, were you tempted when you look around to go, well, I'm just going to stay?
Sure. And I probably stuck around a few years longer than I probably would have otherwise. I don't know. I mean, you can only make the decisions you have based on the information you have at the time, right? And I had very young children. My youngest was 2 when the marriage broke up, and you just think, like, no, you've got to make it work. You've got a 2-year-old who will never know. She will never know what it was like for us to be together, and the 5-year-old who only has vague memories of what it was like for us to be together. So of course, part of me was thinking, well, there's nothing out there. I may as well stick with what I've got. But I was miserable, and he was utterly miserable too. So it was just, why stick together for this? Honestly, at the time, I thought I was doing him a favor. I really did. I was like, you're so unhappy, and we've moved countries, and we've had beautiful babies, and we have a gorgeous life. We both have successful jobs, and you're miserable. Like, let me free you from that. I really thought I was doing him a favor.
I mean, that must have been incredibly painful and hard, though, all the same, even though you thought you were doing him a favor, like such a huge choice to have to make.
Yeah, of course. And it is for anybody. But I think a that he wanted, because he was miserable. And so I had to start thinking, well, we're probably not going to end up where I hope we're going to go. We're probably not going to have the life that I had, wanted for us. So yeah, I started grieving that and letting it go and thinking, all right, well, we're not going to end up there. And maybe we could just be the best divorced people on the planet.
Did you manage that?
Didn't work out so well. Yeah, no. Definitely not. I was, ambitious and optimistic. I was sure we could. I was wrong.
So how did you go from walking away, being in Asia, to getting out there and dating? Like, a lot of people would look at that and go, I'm going to give up, or I'm just going to buy some cats and be single.
I think to begin with, I focused on being the best single mum I could be. And I built myself what I remember being my single mum sanctuary, right? I was very, very intentional about the kind of apartment I wanted to move into. I wanted to move into a place that had shared facilities. So there were lots of other families. My children would have access to other children. It's quite common to live that way in Asia, right? In Singapore, you'd have a condo with a pool and, playgrounds, and all of the families' kids come down. So I was really intentional about what I wanted that to look like for the kids. And I spent the first months really enjoying not having to compromise, right? I was buying the artwork that I like for myself. I was buying the furniture to fill my home. I was eating in the way that I wanted to. I was choosing the rules for my children in the way that I wanted to. I was spending time with them with no compromise. I want to go swimming with them. I don't have to ask if somebody else is in the mood for that. I could do all of those things. So I just built this lovely, like I say, a single mum sanctuary of, this is mine. I'm building this beautiful home just for us. And I just loved it, and I felt safe and secure and happy in that space. And then the children are going back and forth from their dad's place, and then I start having a bit more time to myself. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do with my time? And I'd start working out a bit more and spend time with girlfriends. But of course, all of my friends were still in partnerships, and that's a bit awkward to tag along of like, well, I don't have the kids. Does anyone want me this weekend? Typically no, right? They've got their partner's going to think it's a bit weird that I'm just, tagging along to everything. So I spent a lot of alone time, and I started thinking, I wonder what is out there, right? And I want to say I was alone for at least 6 months, and I didn't really feel like I was healing. Like I say, I grieved that in the marriage. So I didn't feel like I needed to heal from deep wounds or anything. I was just in an expansive space, rediscovering myself and what brought me joy, and all of that was lovely. So then I thought, I wonder what is out there. I know I really don't think there is, but I'm just going to give these apps a go. And, I think a girlfriend and I drank some wine and set up a profile, like, as you do. Yeah. And for a few weeks, I guess, I was just having a look at what's out there, and I got a real fright because I saw someone who was like within a kilometre of where I lived, and I just went, oh, I don't want to run into someone on the street that knows I'm a single mum and is open to dating. So I deleted that until I just worked that bravery up a little bit, spent some time looking, and then I did go on a few dates, and I started seeing this one guy. I probably won't talk about it that much, but I'll just give you the context of it. He was American and living in Thailand, right? So I'm in Singapore. He was at least an hour flight away, but he was regularly visiting Singapore. He was definitely single, so I wasn't worried about whether he, had a wife on the side or anything like that. But so I would see him only like once a month or once every couple of weeks. So he'd fly down to Singapore just for a few days. And what was great about that was it was kind of an entry into dating again with zero expectation of commitment or fathering my children or ending up happily ever after, because neither of us wanted that. We were very clear about, I'm not looking for something, but it reconnected me with my body again. I felt attractive for the first time in years, right? I never felt attracted to my husband. I, as a single person, I didn't like I wasn't treated well. I didn't know what that would feel like to be treated well. So that was a fun discovery. Like, oh, this is what it's like to get thrown around a bedroom again. That's interesting. It's a fun discovery to go, oh, so I'm okay naked. Like, not, no one is going to tell me to put my clothes back on. That was quite fun. And like I say, that went on for a few months, but there was really intellectually nothing there, like nothing. Yeah. It was so uninteresting on so many levels. Like it was awful in terms of like company. No, thank you. Didn't want to spend any time with this human, but I was happy to rediscover being thrown around a bedroom.
I don't think everyone needs that transition, don't they?
It's so funny, isn't it? Just thinking in my 40s that I had like a fuck buddy or whatever. Like, it was just, that wasn't the intention, but that's what it was. And then I remember thinking, okay, so I've got my beautiful single mum sanctuary. I had a career I was happy with. I'm rediscovering that I'm attractive and I'm fine. Like, I'm not a monster. And it is possible to meet someone who, might want to sleep with you in Asia. Like that blew my mind. And then I just remember thinking, actually, it would be really nice to just get to know somebody. I'd really quite like to care about who I'm kissing, because this person, I don't really care about him at all. I don't even like him very much. So I'm not going to make an effort going to see him in Thailand or anything. And at that point, I wrote down my list of, well, if I wanted to find somebody, what would that look like? What is important to me? And I think that when you've come out of a relationship, it's much easier to write the what you don't want list.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think we all do that because we're so focused on what we don't want that we tend to go the opposite, and it's not what we want either.
Yeah, exactly. And I was conscious of being very intentional about what I wanted to bring into my life. So kindness was more important than paycheck, right? And having a similar vision for the future or ambitions for having an adventurous life. Like, adventure is a core value of mine. I didn't want to meet someone who was happy to stay, in the one place forever and ever. And so I started really exploring that and journaling around it and writing this list and having a bit of fun of imagining what would this fantasy human look like? And then, honestly, the day that I felt I'd finished the list, the next day I matched with my current partner on Tinder.
Wow.
It was that fast.
Yeah.
It was, so we matched. I still hadn't broken things off with the Thailand gentleman because whatever, it wasn't a relationship, right? It was like I didn't need to ask his permission. There was nothing exclusive about what was going on. And so I matched with my current partner, and he and I chatted for a month. Right? At first it was just text, it was swapping a few photos, it was getting to know each other, it was talking until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And eventually he said, we have to meet. And I was like, don't think we do. That's not what I need. So I put it off as often as I could until he was finally like, I'm coming to pick you up. Just meet me down the bottom of your stairs. I'll be there at 8 o'clock. If you're not there, we can't keep doing this.
So were you in the same place, or was he somewhere far away?
We were both in Singapore, and now Singapore is a very small, physically a small island. So there's 4 or 5 million people who live there. It's about the same size population-wise as Melbourne, but the island is only 20 kilometers tall and like 60 kilometers across. So it's just very, very condensed. So he was in a completely different part of Singapore, and there's every chance our paths would not have crossed.
Yes.
But he wasn't that far away. It was like 20 minutes on the motorbike. So he came and picked me up, and he at the end of the evening, he gave me a kiss goodnight. And I've got to tell you something really kind of spooky about our connection, unless you've got some questions at this point, because I realize I'm talking.
No, that's great. Keep going.
So after we connected on Tinder, there were a couple of things in the photos that we'd shared with each other. It was like, well, that's curious. Like, tell me a bit more about that photo. And well, that's interesting. Tell me, like, where have you come from? In that chat, we realized, so over that first month of getting to know you, we realized that we had both owned a house on the same street in Amsterdam at the same time.
Wow.
Like a whole other country. Right?
Yeah.
We're both living in Singapore here, and we lived in Amsterdam and owned homes on the same street. Now that's weird.
That's weird. That's freaky. Right? And you didn't meet either.
Then number two, he says in one of the photos, he says, I think I know where you are. And I was a bit like, oh, creepy. He said, I've lived in that condo. We had both lived in the same condo in Singapore where I had built my single mum sanctuary. He had also lived in that condo. Now, I said that Singapore's a small place, but that's still pretty freaky. Like,
that is freaky.
Yeah. And then the third thing was that I saw in one of his photos, it looks like you're in a really rural place here. What are you doing in this picture? And he said, well, I was volunteering in the Philippines. There was a super typhoon back in 2018 or something, earlier than that, 2016 maybe. It was a super typhoon. It wiped out all of these villages. I went with a couple of friends and worked to, do some last mile charity effort. And I was like, yeah, so did I.
Oh, wow.
Same island. We were volunteering on the same island in remote Philippines. I'm not just talking about, you don't just fly into Manila. We were both motivated to help this same group of people doing last mile discovery, like charitable work. And that means going to a supermarket, buying rice and water, and driving up into the mountains and the hills to give people food that they hadn't had in a week. Like, it was intense work. And he had been there, and he flew out 24 hours before I arrived.
Wow.
So spooky.
Wow. That's amazing. So
we had these 3 sliding door moments, and we only connected when we were both single, both ready for a new relationship. And then finally we...
So that is, and I'm curious, like, if you'd have met at any other time, it wouldn't have had the same result.
We wouldn't have been ready. No. If we were in Amsterdam, we were both married to other people. If it had been in Singapore, he was in his marriage at that point. If it had been in the Philippines, I hadn't quite left my husband yet. Like, it was 2 months before I'd asked for the divorce. So none of them were quite the right timing until it was.
Which is amazing, because I do think there is the perfect timing when your intention is right for something to happen. And sometimes we get impatient about why things don't happen. But, at another time, it wouldn't have worked.
No, that's right. No, exactly. I might have met him and just thought, oh my God, he's the man for me. And then it would have created all kinds of damage. Maybe I wouldn't have had the chance to have my second child. Right? My baby girl wouldn't have come along, or his marriage would have been ruined, or whatever. So both of us were single and ready to meet somebody else at the time that we met.
That's amazing. I love that story. I love how those very similar backgrounds, experiences, which would make the connection stronger too.
He's Dutch, right? And I'm Australian. So we didn't grow up in the same place, but we'd obviously made decisions to put us out into the world, and we'd made similar decisions. So when you say we've got similar backgrounds, not necessarily, but similar intentions for our life, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
So how did you go? I mean, I love that you met on Tinder again, because a lot of people go, you can't meet someone on Tinder, and I see so many people that do, and it's probably one of the apps that I do recommend because it's quite simple. People are generally quite honest on it, and I've seen so many people meet their person on an app. Like, it doesn't matter what the app is, it's just an opportunity to actually connect with people that you wouldn't connect with, and you were living in such a small space and you didn't cross paths. So and you honestly, put something different.
I feel like Tinder at the time, so I don't know how much it's changed in the 8 years since I was on it, but at the time it just felt like meeting in a virtual bar. right? You've got nothing to go on apart from the image that you see in front of you, which is meeting the person at the bar, and the first couple of sentences they talk about themselves, right? Then you've got to use your own intuition, your own discernment to decide, am I going to make this connection, and am I going to accept this connection? And then what else do I need to know about this person to trust my intuition to decide to take it to the next step or not? Same thing as meeting at a friend's barbecue or a blind date or at a bar to me. Like, I didn't see that as a big difference.
Absolutely.
In fact, I found it really empowering, because you could just go, no, not accepting that drink. No, don't want that one.
Yes. I agree. When you go in with the mindset that you're having fun with an experience without that pressure on it, it can be quite fun dating. And I see too many people that take the fun out of dating altogether, and it's a very business-like transaction.
Yeah.
And you don't get the best out of anything when you're, trying to qualify people.
Yeah, I think they're taking like those micro steps and then just trusting your intuition. Again, just deciding, do I want to take the next micro step? And making it a bit of fun. I only mentioned 2 people, right? I mentioned the Thailand person and my actual partner. There were some other dates in there. And there were some dick pics. Like, that wasn't fun. But the good thing is, if I haven't handed over my number, then they're just a stranger and I can delete that and laugh about my girlfriends with it. Just go, oh, what is going on in this stupid world of online dating? Thank you, next. Like, no.
Absolutely. And for the guys listening, it's never a good idea to send a dick pic. It's not going to win you a date or get the reaction that you want, right?
It's not what we want, no matter what you've heard.
So, did the chat online, did you build the anticipation by getting to know each other over a period of time? How important was those conversations to you?
Yeah, definitely. Really important. It became the qualifier, right? It almost became easier at the beginning to say, I don't have time to meet. I'm a single mom. I had a fairly high-powered job. I was busy, organizing. Like, I was traveling and organizing children's birthday parties, and I just had commitments. So that took the pressure off. You need to meet me on Friday before we decide whether we can move forward. And he was quite lovely about that. He was, well, if you're too busy, then can you just stay on the phone with me for a bit longer? Yes, I can. So that was really lovely. And getting to know each other was important, right? I needed to figure out which bits of that list does he tick. Are there any red flags? I had 2 divorces at this point, right? The first one I married when I was quite young, and it was physically violent, and that shook me to my core. How could I choose somebody who could do that to me? Like, I'm not a victim. I just didn't associate with what was happening to me. So that made it really hard to trust myself again to meet somebody new. And then when I did finally meet husband number 2, which was again a bit of a whirlwind, and there were some other red flags there, but we were together nearly, I think, 8 years in the end. And so when that ended, again, I was like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I choose decent people? So of course you second guess yourself, and there's what I think, like I say, about grieving that marriage is always coming out of it, and spending some time rediscovering who I am and what's important to me meant that I could be a bit more relaxed about being open to meeting someone new, because I'd created those boundaries of, no, you need to be kind. That's not negotiable. And if I'm not getting that, then we don't need to take this any further. You can find somebody else.
Absolutely. I can imagine, though, how scary that would have been. Like, a lot of people will give up after 2 marriages to kind of trust yourself. Did that take, like you said, did it take work, or just being really clear about what was important and who you were? Was that just really being what was the piece that changed for you? So
I think the work was in that second marriage, because I'd made a commitment to somebody who wasn't treating me very nicely. He wasn't physically violent, but he also just wasn't that into me, as far as I could tell. Like, his behaviors suggested he didn't really want me around.
Wow.
And so while I'm in that marriage, having these two beautiful children and the exact life that I wanted for myself, right? Having a great job and living an international life, but I've chosen a partner who doesn't seem to want me at all.
Yeah.
So while I was in that marriage, I guess I was thinking through, why have I chosen the relationships that I've chosen? Like, what is my belief here that this is all I deserve? And what do I need to do to change that? And so I think that work probably happened while I was married and while I was grieving that I can't change this person. I had chosen two husbands that I thought I would not fix, maybe that's the wrong word, but I thought I would be part of their solution, and I was excited by that. I can help, solve you. And how fucking arrogant of me to think so, right? That is kind of arrogant, but at the same time, it was obviously I was drawn to the damage in them and hoping that the helper in me was hoping I could be part of the solution. But no, they have to do their own work. I can't do it for them.
No, you can't.
No. So husband number 2 hasn't done the work yet, so he's still very angry and bitter and damaged, and I've gone on and I have finally chosen somebody who adores me, adores my children. He's an intellectual equal. We respect each other so much. There's so much love and kindness in our home, and there's so many lovely routines around. We kiss each other when we come into the room. Like it's just a really lovely, different kind of relationship that I hadn't had before.
Yeah. See, that sounds beautiful. And I want to recap for anyone that's listening, if you just hear what Becca said, you're in your 40s. You met a man that finally adores you, and you met him on Tinder, and you now have the life that you want. Like, it wasn't impossible. You haven't missed out on your chance. And in fact, it's you're living the life that you've wanted. So I just want people who are listening to hear that, because I hear so many people feeling like that's not possible for them.
Like it's
and
too
it
late.
absolutely is. It's too late, or it's too hard, or we're too damaged, or we're too broken. It's not the case.
No. And look, he also has an ex-wife, right, and 2 children, and we haven't married. We live in a de facto partnership in Australia. And I think I spent a few years thinking, like, why won't he marry me? And then I realized that I didn't really want the marriage. I just wanted the diamond ring. So I went out and bought myself one.
I love that.
And I don't need the marriage. I've got the relationship that I want. And we joke about it sometimes, especially when my mum's here, and she'll joke about, why haven't you married my daughter? And he'll say, have you met her children? Because the children will be sitting at the table going, hey, me, what? Or he'll say, but if I marry her, she'll leave. Because it's like it's safer for me to not marry her. I just joke about it.
So what I want to know is, how did you know? Like, how long, like after you went on that first date?
Yeah. I think we exchanged the I love yous after about 7 or 8 weeks. It was really quick. So, we spent that month of talking, and I think by date 3, we were saying I love you. Because we were so swept up in that, oh my God, I can't believe I found the person. This is so exciting. Like, do you feel what I feel? I mean, this is quite, extraordinary that we've finally met each other and we're into each other as much as we are. Like, is this the big love? Right? It was just so nice. And then it took a few months. Obviously, we shared the I love yous, but we had the complications of partners or ex-partners and children.
Yeah.
About.
How did you navigate the children? Because a lot of people will ask me, when do you introduce a new partner to your children, and like what sort of impact? I'll leave it at one question and I'll go from there.
Sure. So I didn't introduce the children, for example, to the Thailand person, right? Because he was never going to be in their lives. How did we navigate this? we waited at least a few months.
Mhm.
We wanted to make sure that we were both committed to making it work or giving it the best possible shot. And it almost got to the point where the only way we could give it the best shot is to make sure that our families are part of it. Basically, you can't fall in love and create a partnership with somebody without the unit, right?
Absolutely.
And finding out what the impact of that unit is going to be.
Yeah.
So I remember I'd been single for a year at this point, and I wrote to my ex-husband saying, so you know, I've met somebody, I'm ready to introduce him to the children. Now, he had already introduced a couple of different girlfriends to the kids, so he had a different perspective to me on when was the right time. But by then, so a year after the separation, he had been in a relationship for a few months, so they were quite used to daddy's partner, daddy's girlfriend. And I think we introduced my partner at a barbecue with a bunch of other people. This is mummy's friend, going to come over. You know, he's going to sit and watch some TV with us tonight. What do you think? He didn't sleep over for another few weeks or months. So we kind of took it slowly, but he was around.
Yeah.
Right. And he was around for like pancake breakfasts, but he would come over in the morning, that kind of thing. It was just kind of a slow introduction. Mum really likes this friend. She really likes him, you know. And then I'd ask the kids, what do you think? They're like, we like him too. Like, yeah, I think I might like him like a boyfriend. They're like, oh, that's so exciting, right? So the children were completely bought into it. And then his children were older when we met. So mine were 2 and 5. His were like 7 and 10. Or maybe 7 and 9, so just a little bit older. And he told his ex-wife, I'm ready to introduce the girls to my partner. And then the girls themselves were given the opportunity of what that might look like. You know, daddy's got a girlfriend. In fact, they found out that daddy had a girlfriend because one of them saw a message that had come through on my phone and it had a kiss. And she's like, what's this? We see a kiss on your phone. And they were delighted because they'd seen him alone for a couple of years, right? And they'd seen that he wasn't especially happy, and they thought that if he had a girlfriend, it might be nice to see daddy happy. And the girls came up with this beautiful idea of a day of getting to know you, right? So they decided on what the itinerary for the day was going to be, and we did a little bit of fishing at a pond thing, and then we made sushi together, and then we did something else, and it was great from the start. It was really nice.
That's beautiful. So do the kids all get along with each other? Or
they definitely do. We've had ins and outs. So for the first year after we'd introduced everybody, it was such a gorgeous rhythm, Debbie. I can't tell you how amazing it is to have 4 children one weekend and no children the next weekend, and then 4 children and then none. It's so good. You get to be like an integrated family unit, and then you just get to be lovers. It was great. So yeah, they got along fabulously. Not without the squabbles of he took my toy or blah, blah, blah.
Normal stuff.
And we got a puppy. And I think that brought the family together quite nicely too. It's like, you know, it's our family's dog. It's not mine and my kids. It's not yours and your kids. It's our family's dog. And we moved in together after about 8 months. So all of a sudden it was a family home. The girls had a room there. So it was really well integrated pretty quickly. We had big holidays together, and on those holidays we'd had some pretty big dramas of, actually it was like almost like every holiday one child had a meltdown. You know, in Malaysia it was Lexi, in the Philippines it was somebody else, in Sri Lanka it was somebody else. But the girls are now 20 and 18, right? The kids are all, much older. 20, 18, 14 and 10 are the ages of our 4 now.
Wow. Yeah. And I think I have 3 kids that are all, you know, brothers and, you know, full brothers and sisters, and there'll be a meltdown from one of those each time. So I think it's normal with kids hanging out together. So that's a wonderful story. Yeah. And was there some advice that you wish you'd have known when you were blending the kids together, or?
I think we did a pretty great job. pat on my back, if I do say so myself. I do think we did a good job. I think it was hard to manage the feelings of the other adult, right? The ex-partners on both sides. And there's really nothing we can do about how they feel or act. I think we did a really nice job of making sure that when we were all together, there were activities, right? And also respecting each other's parenting. So the way he parents his daughters is quite different to the way I parent my children, or at least it was in those early years.
Yeah.
For example, the girls were allowed to have like Nutella pancakes for breakfast. My kids were allowed to have like green smoothies or like egg white omelets or something, I don't know. But there was no chocolate in my breakfasts. My kids were like,
understandable.
we just had to respect each other's, different parenting styles when it came to that, and also default to the other person when it came to the disciplining, right? How can I support you in the decisions that you've made regarding your children? And I want to say for the first 4 years, that was really important to keep that boundary. This is your human. I need to support you with your choices regarding your human. Whereas now that we're much more integrated, we moved from Singapore to Australia, and it's Olaf and the younger two and myself. Now it's very much... my son yesterday had said, can I watch television? I said, well, I'm not willing to say yes or no until I've spoken to your dad about it. We need to agree on this. I'm not making that decision for myself. I'm also not getting into trouble for, for saying yes if he's already said no. So let me just align and I'll come back to you. So I think that was something we did well those first few years.
Yeah. That sounds wonderful. So I really love your story, and for anyone that's listening, it would give people a lot of hope, right? Yeah, it's such a beautiful story. And I think, so many people feel like they can't get the relationship they want if they're, over 40, if they're over 50, but it's possible.
Yeah. So, can you imagine? I just hate the idea of being on the planet for another 30 years and not even attempting to see if the person off my list might be out there. It's just doing the exploration, right?
Yeah. But, I've talked to so many women who are in their 70s, and maybe they had a failed relationship, and then they go, look, I just didn't meet anyone else. And I'm like, that's really sad to live the next 30 years without your best friend, without, that person that you share life's adventures with. And, it may feel a bit challenging putting yourself on something like Tinder, but the rewards really outweigh that. And I love your story, how you talked about, you became clear about what you wanted, but it wasn't the superficial stuff. It was kindness. It was whether they shared the same values as you did.
That's right.
And that's the stuff that makes a relationship work. And I love how you said when you became clear that then we
matched the next day. Yeah.
And I've seen that happen so often for people. So I don't know, for anyone listening, I would say not to lose hope, to put yourself out there, have some fun along the way, enjoy.
Take some pressure off for sure, right? I also was pretty clear that he wasn't going to be my everything, right? I have incredible girlfriends. I discovered I'm a pretty great mom with or without somebody else. So my children and I didn't need him as a life raft, but he's this incredible supplement and complement to our lives. He's now such an embedded part to our lives that, we couldn't not have him around, but he didn't need to be my everything. That took some pressure off.
I do love how you say you took that time to really discover what you loved. And I think that's one of the main things I recommend to people. Go discover. And that time of where you said no compromise, I remember that time after the end of my marriage to go buy what I wanted, decorate how I wanted. It was wonderful, but discovering yourself and being true to it is a key to find. If you value yourself, you're going to find someone else that values you as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what I'd like you to do now, if there's nothing else you'd like to share around your love story.
I don't think so.
is I'd love you to share. I absolutely love what you do to
Me too.
help people going through divorce. So I'd love you to tell me what you do, because I know I work with a lot of people as a dating relationship coach, that some of the hangover of going through a divorce and the damage and the fallout, can sometimes take years to get past.
Yeah, of
Whereas,
course.
that's why I'd love you to tell me how you help
Sure,
people go
sure.
through that.
So, as you know, I'm a divorce coach. I'm a podcaster myself too. I'll soon be an author. I'm writing a book about co-parenting and the pros and cons of all the different ways of doing that. So what I do is I work with people at different stages of their divorce, right? It'll be either they are at the stage of thinking about separating and they need some help to get clarity on how to do this with respect and kindness and how to manage their own emotions through it. I do a lot of work with women around emotional overwhelm and building resilience, because divorce is a long process. I think a lot of people think, all right, I've made the decision. It'll be a couple of pieces of paperwork and we're done here. You're never really done with, especially if you've got children, right? This goes on for a really, really long time. So I do a lot of work in the space of emotional regulation, building resilience, building strategies on coping strategies. And then the fun stuff starts, which is, well, who are you? What are your values? What do you want for your life? Rediscovering who you are in order to start building that beautiful life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do, and I love it.
That's wonderful. So how can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram at Do Divorce Right. So I'm there quite a lot. So if people want to DM me on Instagram, there's the link in the bio there to get to my website to find out ways to work with me. There's the podcast if you want to find some resilience techniques, or you want to hear some really positive stories about people who've gone through divorce and gone on to do incredible things like become dating coaches like yourself. That's all in the podcast, or you can reach out to me. I've got the website, which is again Do Divorce Right.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.